Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and officers, and welcome to this Development Control Committee meeting on August the 12th, 2015. Fire evacuation procedure first. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the front of this room. It's badly written, this. Go down the stairs and we meet in the War Memorial Park, just out there. This meeting will be webcast. Is it working? Good. And please, can all members and the public switch off their phones or turn them to silent, please? Thank you. I now move on to apologies for absence and substitutions, of which there is one. Councillor Robinson is standing in place of Councillor Bowyer. And any declarations of interest? No. Well, I will not partake of the second item as I know the people involved, so I'll leave the room. Urgent matters. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight to members the recent email circulated by Mike Townsend, the Planning Development Manager, regarding the recent changes to the following the High Court judgment regarding Section 106 changes, and just to emphasise to members that all applications and appeals that we have that are currently live, where relevant, will be making reference to those changes within all of the reports.
Thank you for that. Now, for the benefit of the members of the public attending, I'd just like to explain who everybody is around this table for you. My name is Councillor Donald Sherlock, and I'm the chairman of the committee, and Councillor Leeks is the deputy chairman. Down the sides of the table, to the left and right, are the councillors who sit on the committee and who will be making the decisions on the applications this evening. Immediately to my right and left are the officers who will be advising the councillors. In addition, I'd like to explain that Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be looking at the evidence brought before us tonight and will make a decision based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning guidance and policy, and I understand that planning can be emotive, and I ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout the evening. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to return to their seats once their presentation is complete. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. And finally, I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and to keep any comments on each item to a maximum of 4 minutes. Thank you. Now we move on to the minutes of the last meeting held on July the 15th. Members, are you happy that I sign these?
Great.
Thank you. So item number 5, applications for planning permission and public participation thereon. Item number 1 is the Brian Hurst Limited Recycling Yard at Hurstbourne Priors, and I have got speakers in the form of Mr. Brian Hurst and Ian Laster. But first of all, I will ask Lisa Sowden to present it to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline application for residential development for up to 30 dwellings and an element of commercial use for B1A office, with access and associated works following the demolition of the existing buildings on the site. The principle of development and access are the only matters for consideration at this stage, with layout, scale, appearance and landscaping reserved for future approval. Members have had the benefit of viewing the site. The site lies in a countryside location within the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty, outside any defined settlement policy boundary. However, Safe Policy D9 of the adopted local plan supports the reuse of previously developed land in the countryside. You'll see from the main papers that the Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and this is a significant factor in assessing this proposal. The NPPF, the National planning framework also supports the change of use of employment land for housing where there is an identified need. There are no overriding requirements to retain this site for purely employment purposes in light of the housing land supply position. Due to the exceptional housing need circumstances and the specific nature, location and scale of the site, and this is all set out in the main report, it's considered appropriate and justified in this particular case to accept an off-site affordable housing contribution. Turning to the update sheet, the notes of the viewing panel are detailed therein, explaining where members viewed the site from, and a further update with regard to the off-site affordable housing contribution. Members will note that the Council has engaged a consultant to assess the information that has been submitted by the developer with regard to this off-site provision. And whilst a figure has not yet been formally agreed, the consultant has advised that the approach being put forward with regard to the formula and the methodology is valid. The recommendation is therefore for approval, subject to the completion of a 106 agreement for all those matters identified in the main paper, together with all those conditions listed therein as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Right, Mr. Laster and Mr. Hurst. You will have 4 minutes between you, and we'll give you a minute's notice at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to those who were able to visit the application site on Friday. You'll be pleased to note I don't intend to say much, but Mr. Hurst and I will be pleased to try to answer any questions you may have. The application was submitted 11 months ago and simply sought to establish the principle of development of this brownfield site for a mix of dwellings and some employment space to compensate for the loss. The scrapyard is surplus to my client's requirements, and the existing activity would be transferred to Bullington Cross if this site is developed. If it isn't developed, it will continue to operate as a scrapyard and will have to pay its way. In the last 11 months, we have worked with your officers in order to satisfy any concerns regarding traffic, contamination, ecology, noise, etc., and various expert reports have been submitted and considered by your officers. We are very pleased that we have now reached the stage of a positive recommendation. Originally, we proposed a development of 44 dwellings that gave rise to 7 letters of objection from local residents. There were 5 letters of support and 2 regarded as neutral. The proposed number of dwellings was reduced to 30 and no further objections were received. The Hurstbourne Priors Parish Council's concerns are listed in the report, but it was confirmed at the viewing that the Parish Council has no objection in principle. The main concerns are the impact of the additional traffic and the demand for school places. With regard to traffic, there will be more trips than at present, but I suggest cars will have far less impact on local roads and villages than HGV lorries. In relation to schools, the Hampshire County has requested a contribution towards any necessary increase in capacity. That will be secured through the required Section 106 agreement, together with any other necessary contributions, including off-site affordable housing as already outlined. The site is closer to St Marybourne village, and residents would help to support services in that village, so I'm pleased to note that the Parish Council of St Marybourne did not raise objection, but chose to remain neutral. I commend the officers' thorough and balanced report and would summarise by saying the development doesn't tick every box, but I agree with your officers that the benefits outweigh any harm that has been identified. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, questions to Mr. Laster or Mr. Hurst? Councillor Tucker.
This is going to be a strange one. When we were on site, we noticed there were a large number of swallows on the wires. They don't get mentioned in our officer's report with regard to anything that we might be able to do. If somebody comes up with an idea, would you be prepared to support it, please?
Yes, Councillor, certainly. There has been a full ecological survey and report and mitigation strategy, which includes nesting birds as well as bats and field mice. So it's all covered in a report.
Any more questions, members? No? Right, thank you both very much. Right, questions to officers, members? Do I have any questions to officers?
Sorry, to continue on the same vein as my question, is there something, I haven't seen obviously the full report behind this, does it actually specifically mention swallows? Because they are becoming a rather rare breed, which is very, very sad.
I haven't read the whole report in detail, so I can't say that for definite that they're covered. But there is a condition proposed regarding a habitat enhancement scheme, so we can obviously feed that back, and obviously the applicant is here and has heard that you wish that to be covered. So that condition requires a habitat enhancement plan, and so that could cover swallows within that as well.
Any more questions? Councillor Bound.
Yes, good. Would there be, what would the estimate of the number of children that might be involved in needing school places from a site of 30 dwellings? Is there any?
Sorry, I don't have that information before me, but suffice to say the Hampshire County Council as Education Authority have requested via the 106 the usual contributions towards school provision. So that's worked out on you know, they will work that out on what they expect the anticipated child population arising from that level of development.
I just wondered whether you actually knew of.
Any other questions, members? No? Right. We move to debate then. Does anybody have some views to express on this? Councillor Bound.
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. I mean, we went round the site on whenever it was, Friday. An interesting experience, I think. With all the machinery at work at the same time. I mean, it looked an absolute tip to me, and I can't imagine why it would exist in an area of outstanding natural beauty. I can only, from my point of view, houses would be a great improvement on it. I know that the local people have concerns about the viability of the site because of its distance from shops, for instance, from schools and the like. But it is only 1.5 kilometres, I think, from St Marybourne, where there is a shop. I mean, all schools are having difficulty now in catering for numbers of children, so all schools are having to expand. So it's not an unusual phenomenon, and I have no difficulty in sort of going along with the officer recommendation on this.
Thank you. Councillor Leeks, followed by Councillor Tucker.
I was just going to move.
Councillor Taylor.
I was just going to move the recommendation, Chairman. I don't see a problem here. Certainly tidy up the site.
Councillor Tucker.
I just wanted to say that in Borkhurst there was a former site that was changed, yes, and there are lovely houses there, and that wasn't absolutely next door to a village. It was sort of in an open sort of area. So I'm very supportive of this.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't say I'm very supportive of it. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd hardly be using this site in the middle of an AONB for this. There must be better uses. Having said that, what other uses could there be? There are lots of problems. We know that the MPPF asks for presumption in favour of sustainable development, but we looked around this and we drove out of it and we drove around, and this is hardly sustainable. In fact, it's a clump of houses in the middle of nowhere, really. And there are lots of objections. Hurstbourne Parish Council, the landscape officer, biodiversity officer and urban design officers have all retained their objections to this. So I don't easily say yes to this one because I think there must be so much better things we could do with it. But having said that, it's truly ghastly now, as we saw, and anything's better than that. And I noticed that Councillor Watts is sort of implying that they need more affordable houses in Whitchurch, and so we should consider this one favourably. although he's not here to say that. The only thing I would say is that we must very carefully look at the designs when they do come in and make sure that they are really top-notch. But having said all, yes.
Good. Well, that's really, most of that was reserved matters, so they will come up later. Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Chair. One of the other things I think we noticed on the viewing as well, as you come out of as you exit the site, I think there are some houses already there as well. Fairly new, I think, on the left-hand side, so you can see from that picture. I'm not sure how many dwellings. Is it Cressington, I think it was. So, I mean, you know, there already are people living in that area as well, and I'm happy to approve it as well.
Right. We have anything more? Oh, Councillor Bound.
I'll move it if it hasn't been moved. Although I think I will support David if David.
Right. So we have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour, raise your hands. Unanimous. That is carried. Thank you.
So just to confirm, the application is approved subject to the completion of the 106 agreement, and I was going to suggest additional informative to make reference to the swallows being included within the Habitat Enhancement Plan, condition 10.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We now move to item 2, and I will hand over to Councillor Lee. Sir.
Right, councillors, this is Moth House, Brown Candover, Alsford, Upton Gray. We don't think the parish council, I think. Wendy Simpson, would you like to come forward? And the officers will.
Thank you, Councillor. This application is for retention of development of an existing outbuilding, including the replacement of existing weatherboarding to the rear elevation of said building with brick for use as an estate office, games room and gym. The application also includes use of the change of land from agricultural to residential for the overlap of the building footprint only. Moth House is a Grade 2 listed building within the Brown Candover Conservation Area. The building in question replaces a curtilage listed building which was previously granted planning permission and listed building consent for demolition and replacement.
Thank you. Right. Sorry, not organised here. You have 4 minutes.
Am I on? Yes. Super. I'm the clerk for Candover's Parish Council, and I've been asked to come along and talk today. The retrospective planning application that we're talking about has actually been amended. The original application came out on the 21st of May and included a roadway that went across a paddock at the back of this particular site. It was amended on the 1st of July in order to take that particular part of the planning application out. But I just would like to speak from the Parish Council's notes about our queries about this particular application. It seems to the Parish Council that this application and its predecessor represents a flagrant attempt to flout the planning regime by way of a build first and seek consent later approach. The Parish Council is concerned at the impact of such a retrospective consent, both in terms of the President and the context of this principally rural area that enjoys conservation area status. The fact that this application may or may not have incurred considerable expense in the various projects should not be a relevant factor in any decision made for retrospectively granting planning permission. Furthermore, the Parish Council query the use of these various additional buildings that have been used over the years. The fact that the games room, stroke, estate office, etc. building strays onto the agricultural land and the resultant change of use from agricultural to residential sought by the applicants in order to retrospectively ensure that the new building is sited in compliance with the planning regime is an issue over which the parish council and also many local residents feel very strongly. The Candover Valley and its surround is both a conservation area and best characterised as deeply rural in character. It seems insidious that to permit the change of use of an agricultural paddock to residential merely to accommodate the applicant's wishes and to exceed the term of the planning permission for which they have applied, it seemed in good faith. Granting such consent sets a poor and undesirable precedent and will dismay many other residents who have over the years applied for permission for similar projects but have had these applications refused. The fact that the application The fact that the applicant has proceeded to build on agricultural land in breach of the planning regime should not in any way influence the underlying principle that agricultural land is just that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the clerk? Yes, Councillor Byrne.
Yeah. Did you support the previous, the original planning application?
Yes, the parish council fully supported the original planning application to take down the old building and replace it with this particular building, which should have been on exactly the same footprint.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Right, questions for the officers? Councillor Brown.
Sorry, I am concerned about this. I mean, what I fail to understand is how they got away with completing this outside the original planning application that was granted. I mean, how come it's come to this stage?
Unfortunately, sometimes development isn't in accordance, as we're probably all well aware, with the approved plans. We as planning officers, unfortunately, don't have the resources, and it's not our role to actually police the development that takes place. The onus is always on the applicant to ensure that they build in accordance with the approved plans, that any relevant conditions, etc., are discharged. However, occasionally it does come to light that breaches of planning consent for whatever reason have occurred, and unfortunately that is just the nature of the beast. When that happens, obviously officers need to take a view on the acceptability or otherwise of the development that has taken place, and try and seek a resolution accordingly.
Councillor Bound, then.
The reason for approval enhances the character of the conservation area and the setting of the adjacent listed building. I fail to understand that, bearing in mind how far they've slipped from what was approved in the first place.
The reason for approval actually state the proposed development preserves and or enhances the character and appearance of the conservation area, and that's referring back to the statutory test in the 1990 Act, which effectively says exactly that. It preserves and or enhances. So if development is no worse than what was there before, then the presumption is in favour of approval. Obviously the ideal is for enhancement, but the bottom line, the baseline on which we have to make a judgment is whether or not it preserves. I take on board Councillor Bound's point, but in making the judgment as to whether something preserves, officers have to assess harm and whether the character of the conservation area is harmed, and if so, to what degree, in coming to that decision.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be absolutely clear. I mean, I know these retrospective applications are really contentious, but in regard to what I think probably was the subject of a lot of objections, the access from gravel, close and associated track, it is mentioned a couple of times, but that has been removed from the application. I just absolutely equivocally that's gone, yeah? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Chair, I have a question actually on that one. I thought, did I read somewhere it said it's going to be grass-created?
That was the original proposal. As you heard from the Parish Council, the application has been amended. Actually, it's been amended twice. The second amendment was to completely remove the access track and to lose the access onto Gravel Close in its entirety. So the track will be returned to grass, and the fence will be reinstated at the junction with Gravel Close.
Councillor Tomlin.
Then my original question. Could you just clarify actually how much this building has strayed onto agricultural land? Because I can't quite work it out on the plans, please.
It's 1.2 metres. It is actually detailed in the officer report somewhere. I'm afraid I'm unable to lay my hands on it at the moment, but it's 1.2 metres, page 64.
That's what it is at the moment. What is at the moment or was? 'Cause area this is. It's grass at the moment, isn't it?
I understand the grass has already been reinstated and it was in that state when members viewed the site. Yes, the only difference being that the edge of the building that you're seeing there was the building that was demolished.
Any other questions for officers? Right, debate. Yes, Councillor.
Try again. Obviously not strong enough. I actually would go along with the recommendation. I don't like things that are retrospective, but I don't see the harm at all now in what is it remaining at present. So I would move it.
Yeah. Do I have a seconder for this? Did you want to ask? Did you want to debate?
I'm just going to make my contribution, Chair, if I may. I mean, I'm in total agreement with the Parish Council on this. I mean, I just listed from the report the things which weren't complied with: siting, footprint, height, materials, details on new building, dimensions. Building is a one-storey plus attic and not a single storey as approved. Size of windows, details, and so on. I mean, I think it's appalling that they should be allowed to get away with building something that deviates so much from the original approval, and I cannot go along with the officer recommendation.
Councillor. Yeah.
If I could just bring to your attention, I think it's something that's been raised before. Just because an application is retrospective, that in itself isn't a reason to refuse it. Yes, it might. It's annoying to have got to this state to see the amount of changes, but you have to look at the proposals as they are. The harm, as Rachel has pointed out, whether there's been the harm is sufficient, is so adverse on the conservation area. It's unfortunate we've got to this position, but you can't hold it against the applicant that it's a retrospective application, so you have to determine it on the basis of what's before you, irrespective of the retrospective nature of it.
Councillor Brown.
I'll just come back on that. Then it would seem to me that anybody can get away with changing any application then on that basis.
Unfortunately, that's how planning works, yes.
Councillor Potter.
I mean, we've been here before in this debate. I mean, I remember the history of the application anyway, and I think, as Councillor Tucker points out, I think the ultimate test, albeit there's a list here that seems to be very substantial, is measuring the harm, isn't it? You know, how substantial are those variations from the original planning approval? What harm do they identify? What do they represent? And if we judge it in terms of what we're now looking at, the completed building, albeit different to what was originally approved, it seems to me, and I haven't visited the site recently, but it seems to me they are not so heinous as for us to say we should actually say that enforcement action has to be taken. That is unrealistic, and we need to face facts in regard to some of these things. It's it's sad that people have that little respect for the planning process on occasions, and will deal with that in the way that we have to on occasions. But on this occasion, I don't believe that's necessary, and I'd second Councillor Tucker's proposal, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any more more debate? Otherwise, go to a vote. It's been proposed and seconded for the recommendation. Please show those who are for it. Those against, please show. And those who are, thank you, abstaining, 3. 3, yeah.
The application is approved in accordance with the conditions and informatives as outlined in the officer's report.
Right, we now move to item number 3, which is 25 to 27 Winchester Street, Basingstoke, and change of use. I have to speak at this. I find the right piece of paper. Brenda Turner objecting, Hannah Fortune in support, and Councillor Reid as well, and it will be presented by Rob Sims. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposals for the part change of use of a site from an A4 use class A4 drinking establishment to a betting shop, as well as external alterations to the shop front, installation of a satellite dish, aerial and free air conditioning units which are at the rear of the unit. The application is recommended for approval when considering national guidance and local planning policies against material considerations. There's just one update, which includes a summary of the viewing panel where members were showing the rear and front of a building. And the update is to amendment to condition 3, which is proposed glazing details and joinery details, and whereby the reason is being changed to include reference to preservation of the character and appearance of a conservation area. Before it mentioned listed building, which was incorrect.
Thank you, Rob. Brenda Turner. You will have 4 minutes, and I will give you 1 minute's notice at the end. No, you switch on the long...
That one? Put it on. Thank you. The top of the town concept master plan was approved in March 2014. The first objective being to improve the shopping and food on offer so that it becomes a more attractive destination, with a focus on independent and specialist shops and cafes. A betting shop is neither independent, nor specialist, nor a food outlet. In my view, yet another betting shop in an area where there are already at least 5 within sight of each other might have a negative effect upon the vitality and viability of Winchester Street, and therefore be likely to be counterintuitive to encouraging choice and competition there in the future. I would be interested to know how another betting shop would enhance vitality and increase footfall. There is presumably a finite number of gamblers who already frequent this area. It may give these people more choice, but the number would stay the same. I'm at a loss to understand why the planning officer would envisage an increase in pedestrian footfall in Winchester Street, as it is only a few yards from the existing corals. The beneficiaries of this application would of course be the council, financially speaking, because the premises has been empty for so long. But planners, while desperate to re-let the site, need to have regard to the suitability of the tenant, conservation issues, and the top of town master plan. Vitality and footfall have already been addressed by the opening of the new ice cream parlour opposite these premises. In my view, another betting shop would have no positive effect whatsoever. I would also be interested to know how many betting shops in this relatively small area would be required to be judged as saturation. In my opinion, this application will have an adverse effect on an area for which we all had such high hopes when the master plan was agreed last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. Any questions, members, for Mr. Turner? No? Thank you very much. Right, next, please, Hannah Fortune in support. You will have 4 minutes and we'll give you a minute's notice at the end.
Okay, thank you. Just to let you know, I'm from Nathaniel Litchford and Partners, and we're the planning consultant for William Hill. So I'm going to keep it quite short again, and really just here to answer some questions and perhaps address some of the concerns that have been raised about the proposed change of use for William Hill betting office. Just sort of like to start by just perhaps establishing why William Hill are interested in Basingstoke, and just to say this has been a sort of long-term interest. They've actually haven't got any representation within the borough at all. The nearest sort of William Hill betting shops were over 15 miles away in Farnborough and Newbury. They've been carefully considering and have had long-term interest and wants to sort of open a store in your largest town, Basingstoke, for a while, but they haven't had the right opportunity, and they just have been waiting for this to come along, and thinks this vacant former nightclub represents this sort of opportunity for them because it's policy compliant. We do consider that it will enhance the vitality and viability of the town centre for the various reasons submitting the application. Probably one of the main ones is that the fact that it's a long-standing vacant unit. It's been vacant since November 2013 and actively marketed for a long time, and there's been no interest in it. Bringing it back to active use will, obviously enhance the health of the town centre. Which we note from recent data, you've got a slightly higher than average vacancy rate within the town, so hopefully that's a positive in that respect. In terms of the research on linked trips and footfall, this has been established from previous survey data, and William Hill is actually in the process of updating that and have commissioned an independent survey company to undertake some recent surveys across the country, and there is evidence that it does increase footfall, and it does increase linked trips to other shopping centres. People don't just come to visit the betting shop, they come to visit other shops. And sort of responding to the comment about the fact surely there's a finite number of people going to betting shops, there's evidence that actually William Hill does grow the market as well, and it does encourage, especially given that the closest William Hill is some distance away from that. I think we're keen to express that William Hill has established the sort of betting shop. It takes pride in managing these shops well, and wants to manage them successfully and has experience in that. The proposal will invest over £200,000 in the unit to enhance its appearance and bring it back into use, and will create 6 jobs for the local economy. And I suppose finally it's the concern about the over-concentration. I don't know if it's helpful to note that there's 5 betting shops within Basingstoke. That represents 1.28% of the total town centre shops, according to GOD. By bringing it up, allowing the William Hill, that will go up to 1.5, and the average across all town centres is 3.8. So you're still, when comparing it to the average, it's still below that. So we wouldn't suggest it is an over-concentration in that respect. And that's really all I've got to say. And if you've got any questions on any of those, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Could you sell it a little more to me? Apart from occupying a vacant unit, which is obviously good. How will William Hill actually enhance the vitality of this part of town and help to make it, which is our wish, a vibrant destination?
I think it goes back to the footfall and the link trips. It will encourage people to visit that part of the centre. Sort of at the moment it's vacant as shown, and it will enhance visitors that won't just go to the William Hill but go to other shops and the cafes and restaurants in that area, and then spend money elsewhere in the centre as well.
Thanks. So you're suggesting then that people will come to that part of town just because William Hill's there, even though there are 3 or 4 others already there?
It will encourage visitors, as sort of saying William Hill, it doesn't just utilise existing sort of visitors, it grows it as well, and there's client sort of brand loyalty that will encourage visitors that perhaps wouldn't even come to Basingstoke. They might have gone elsewhere, so it'll encourage sort of new trips as well to the town.
So I don't know much about the betting world, so you think people will actually travel from far afield just to come to William Hill in Basingstoke?
There's actually a representative from William Hill in the audience, and I don't know if he might be, I don't know if he's allowed to speak, but he might be able to help sort of answer that more robustly, but understand that there are clients that are perhaps loyal to William Hill that might shop online, utilise the services online, and then it will encourage it. But there's confidence that, there's the evidence sort of where they're located close to other ones that they do encourage the link trips, and people will go and visit that will spend money elsewhere in the town.
Any other questions? Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. The previous speaker spoke about saturation point. Would you not agree that having 5 shops within a distance of a furlong, and I use betting terms, is saturation? Because you mentioned 5. Well, you've got 1 in the bus station, you've got 1 at Camrose, 1 at Tadley, and wherever there is a public, there's always a betting shop. I would disagree with you when you said it, you don't think that's saturation. I think it is.
I think it just goes back to the proportion of shops within Basingstoke at the moment that are betting shops, which is less than half of the national average across other centres. I think the way that Basingstoke Town Centre sort of works is you've got your primary shopping area with all your A1 retail, and then the sort of north part, top of the town, which is your more retail service. So they are generally in sort of this part of the town centre, but that is how it's sort of the nature of your town centre works with the shops and then the services. So we don't think that Basingstoke is oversaturated at this point, given that it's half of perhaps the national average. I don't know if it's sort of relevant to note that Aldershot has 7 betting shops, and that's a small nearby is a smaller town. Just for comparison.
Any more questions, members? Right. Thank you, Ms. Fulton. Right. Councillor Reid. You will have 4 minutes, and we'll give you a minute's notice.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. You won't be surprised to know that I'm here to ask you to turn this application down. I'm here as top of town portfolio holder, as you're aware. And I'm here hopefully to give you some reasons why you should turn it down as well. First of all, if I could just very briefly take issue with the greatest respect to the representative from William Hill. She mentioned that we have above average vacancy in the town centre or top of town. Our latest data is that we have below average high street vacancy rates for the top of town. So just to put that into context. Also, I think when she was referring to the number of betting shops, she was including the whole of the town centre as a proportional representation, where of course we're talking about 5 betting shops already at the top of town. So we're not talking about the whole town centre. So I think that puts it more in context as well. So first of all, reasons to oppose. There was a change in planning law which came in on the 15th of April 2015, which was specifically brought in by government, to enable councils to turn down betting shop applications. And at that time, Communities Minister Stephen Williams said, people across the country were concerned about the explosion in the number of betting shops in some high streets. The coalition government is determined to build a stronger economy and a fairer society with healthy and diverse high streets that aren't dominated by betting shops, which is why we are now giving councils tough new powers to prevent the proliferation of betting shops in the area. So that's one reason. Another reason, of course, is the Top of Town master plan, which you all know. This underpins the Top of Town programme, which is an adopted policy of the council. I would suggest to you that an extra betting shop at the top of town is completely at variance with this stated policy of the council. And as an example, just to quote from it, Top of Town will become a more vibrant destination for the town with a mix of shop, cafes and activities within its attractive historic streets. To improve the shopping and food offering in the top of towns, it becomes a more attractive destination with a focus on independent and specialist shops and cafes. Concept Master Plan provides a vision for the future of the top of town to reposition it as a destination in Basingstoke and a focus for niche retail, cafes and bars. Also, as this year's further development of the top of town programme, we have an aim which we are hoping to achieve by early next year, of reviewing all council policies, including those relating to planning, licensing and conservation, to ensure they support the concept master plan for the top of town. So clearly we need integrated thinking with our planning and licensing policies to ensure that we are underpinning the work that we are doing at the top of town.
1 minute, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. And then just finally, the report itself actually states the town centre master plan as a material consideration for this application, so I would urge you to consider that. I would obviously disagree with the greatest respect to the officer's suggestion that it is considered an acceptable town centre use that would continue to attract footfall and contribute to vitality and viability. I have to say that is certainly not the view of myself as portfolio holder for the top of town, nor indeed for Chas Bradfield, who of course is town centre manager and is driving the town centre programme. Neither of us would agree with that statement. We feel this is completely contrary to the top of town programme and would not help or enhance the top of town whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Councillor Reid? Councillor Tomlin.
Good evening, Councillor. Well, very quickly, what sort of probability do you hold that this unit might become full in the next 6 months to a year?
Obviously can't give you any guarantees as to that. It has been marketed, but I think you have to obviously consider the balance between an empty property or a betting shop, and in my view, although this may sound heresy, I would rather it were empty than become yet another betting shop, which further sort of denudes the whole spirit and character of the top of town.
Any more questions? Councillor Potter.
Hello, Councillor Reid. I just want to be clear, I mean, as a regulatory committee with the terms of reference we have currently, what are you saying is the discretion allowed for this committee in regard to this application? Because it seems to me we're faced obviously with a straightforward application for change of use. We're talking about the normal planning criteria that would apply, and we are obligated, it seems to me, as the chairman obviously points out many a time, not to take a political view on this. We look at this in pure planning reg terms, and that's the change of use, the advice we have from officers regarding its role within the conservation area, etc. What are you saying we should do beyond that?
I'm not suggesting it's a political decision at all, Councillor Potter. I've pointed you to the change in the law which came in this year, which was specifically brought in by government to enable councils such as ourselves to turn down a proliferation of betting shops. And I think in anybody's money, 5 betting shops at the top of town is certainly a proliferation. And also, I'm asking you to look at the material consideration as agreed by officers of the town centre programme, which an extra betting shop application is completely at variance with.
Can the officers just interject there? They have a contrary view about the law.
it's not contrary, it's just to try to clarify. Whereas previously, betting shops, you could change units without to a betting shop without actually having to apply for a change of use. The legislation that's now come in is to take betting shops into its own class, and you'll have heard this term, sui generis use class, which means any applicant wanting to establish a betting shop has to apply planning permission and therefore give authorities the opportunity to make that decision. Whereas before there was no need to apply, it was permitted development to change between retail units. So I just wanted to clarify what that legislation was. And just in terms of the weight, obviously the officer's report does refer to the top of town master plan as being a material consideration, but also the planning policy framework and the local plan policies take precedence. They have more weight in planning terms than this document, albeit accepting that it is adopted council policy. It doesn't have the same weight in planning terms as the framework and the adopted local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Potter, do you want to continue, or are you...
No, I'm happy with the officer's comment.
Any more questions for Councillor Reid? No? Right. Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. Right, members. Questions to officers. Do we have any? Councillor Goodison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly disappointed that the planning officers don't appear to have attached as much importance to the top of town master plan as one might have hoped. In the context of this particular application. I mean, Councillor Potter. Well, no, I'll leave the other bit for the debate. But I'm disappointed that you don't appear to have given as much attention as I would like to feel you had to the top of town master plan.
Is there a question there, Councillor Goodison?
Well, the question is, why didn't you give it more consideration?
Yeah, we'll just come back on that point. So, as Lisa just pointed out, the MPPF and local plan policies are of more weight than the master plan. And while we have considered it in terms of being relevant, and we acknowledge that we are trying to improve that area, we have to be realistic, and that is MPPF promotes economic growth. The property's been vacant for since March 2014, so we have considered it on balance, that whilst we acknowledge the intentions and the kind of the views of the master plan, the realistic option is that things properties haven't been coming forward, and as such this use will provide an economic benefit to the area and bring people back into use, and that's what tips the balance in this instance.
Any more questions for officers? Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Goodison.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify here, I haven't read everything there, but it's saying that only part of the building is going to be used as a betting office, and the rest of it will stay as a drinking establishment. Can you just clarify the build-up of that particular unit for me, please?
Yeah, no problem. So the existing drinks establishment is a whole unit for 25 to 27A Winchester Street, and that has a floor space of 328 square metres on the ground floor. So the proposed use has a floor space of 197 square metres, so the remaining 131 will remain as an A4 use. I mean, that's partly looking to submission of the planning statement. It seems to be that the unit was a bit too large for a lot of people, and hence why William Hill come in for a part change of use in this instance.
Councillor Goodison.
Thank you, Chair. Well, of course, I'm sure we all want to improve the top of town, and we are grateful to hear you say that that's your policy as well. And are you satisfied that another betting shop is going to increase the footfall to the top of town? Surely 4 betting shops already in existence who can mop up anybody who wants to place a bet. Is there any reason to imagine that a football would be increased by yet another betting shop?
Yeah, it's not guaranteed, obviously, but from appeal decisions elsewhere, I refer to page 76 of the agenda, which cites an appeal decision in Great Yarmouth. You know, it's quite a distance away, obviously, but the inspector in that instance accepted that betting shop can attract high levels of custom and link trips to a town centre. So in the sense that it has been proven before and accepted by inspectors that they do increase footfall in that part of the area. I mean, particularly this western side of Winchester Street is this vacant unit, and there isn't an existing betting shop apart from Coral, which is more centrally located. So that side of the kind of the street will be more used, if you like, in bringing this economic use into the area.
Councillor Robinson, followed by Councillor Tucker.
Thank you. On the part change of use, am I right in thinking that on that the majority of the building will still remain vacant?
So you've got first and second floor to that as well, which is vacant, but this proposal just looks at the ground floor, just takes over the ground floor. So the actual majority of the ground floor will be the new betting shop, marginal majority. So it's just to repeat, the ground floor at the moment is 328 square metres. Proposed change of use, so the William Hill will occupy 197 of that footprint, with a remaining 131 on the ground floor, as well as the first and second floor will be vacant as well.
So basically we still finish up with a considerable empty unit. So it doesn't fill the unit by any means, so it doesn't achieve filling the unit, only does half the job.
Yeah, it doesn't fill the unit completely, albeit a kind of contrary argument to that would be you could still achieve your specialist shops and cafes if necessary, and have more control on the marketing on that unit as well. So,
Councillor Tucker.
Yes, when we were on site, we noticed also that next door was vacant as well. Would you argue the same kind of thing if another betting shop wanted to go in there?
Each application on their own merits, I'm afraid. No, we have to consider how long that's been marketed for as well, and take the balanced judgment on that as well. But you know, I'd imagine we'll receive some strong opposition to another betting shop down there, and officers probably won't be too keen on that either. But we can only consider what's before us today. So.
Any other questions? Councillor Tomlin.
Right, just a quick one. Did I understand earlier that we actually are the owners of this shop, or the landlords? We're not. Right, thank you.
Right, members. No more? Let us move, therefore, to debate. Councillor Goodison.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Potter raises a very valid point when he says that we should look at this in pure planning terms, which is, of course, completely correct. I do feel, however, that it's worth saying that we do have, in my view, have a responsibility and a duty to look at it also in terms of the overall planning plans for the top of town in its entirety, because obviously this will have this may not be a very major development in terms of the whole of the town, but in terms of the impact it's going to have just at the top of town is very substantial. And I mean, we have plans for the top of town, which I'm sure all councillors here would support in improving the top of town. And surely we need to look at this also in terms of the impact it's going to have on the whole of the top of the town itself, not just simply in isolation. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. We're always wanting to take some control of the direction Basingstoke takes, and I think this new planning rule has given us an opportunity to do so, and I think we should grasp it with both hands. For me, nothing gives a more down-at-heel impression of a town than having a load of betting shops in the street. Let me just, but we do need good planning reasons for this, and I know that the officers are going to say that straight away. So I'm going to just give 3 quotes. The first quote is from our National Planning Policy Framework at paragraph 23. It says, where town centres are in decline, which our top of town has been, local planning authorities should plan positively for their future to encourage economic activity. To repeat some of what Councillor Reid said, this is our top of town vision. Objective 1, to improve the shopping and food offer in top of town so that it becomes a more attractive destination with a focus on independent and specialist shops and cafes. The vision at the top of town will become a more vibrant destination for the town with a mix of shops, cafes and activities within its attractive historic streets and spaces. I can't see so far that a betting shop fits in there. NPPF again, number 17, under core planning principles. Core land use planning principles, one of them, it says, should take account of the different roles and character of different areas, promoting the vitality of our main urban areas. And this is just what we've identified. We've identified a different area here. Many people have worked really hard to establish the top of the town as being a place with a different character, with a character that's to do with eateries, etc., which is also the centre of our purple flag area. Very proud of our purple flag. I don't think that another betting shop is going to help us keep our purple flag, which is for the nighttime economy and for entertainment for people and for families. And so, I mean, I have to say I totally agree with Councillor Reid when she says that this application is completely at variance with our vision for the top of town. I categorically cannot support it. And I think that we should take the opportunity to take a bit of control now to help the vision for the top of town come into being and refuse this.
Is that
That's a proposal.
Thank you. And you seconded. Any other comments from members? Councillor Potter.
I'll make some observations if I may, Chair. I mean, I think probably most of us, all of us, around the table would prefer this to be a different type of application. I'm not sure if it was a florist, whether we'd be doing an economic analysis of whether the florist shop could survive, if I'm frank with you, having regard to the competition. I mean, we're reminded by the officers, there's a couple of key paragraphs, I think, in page 77. I mean, it is this dilemma, the planning balance to be struck between bringing the building back into economic use, and whatever you might think about what it's going to be used for, it will have an economic use which it certainly doesn't have at the moment, and that will make a contribution to the vitality and viability of the town centre. I mean, to that limited market, no doubt, but in terms of the analysis you'd make in regard to people that would come and go from that particular building, or resisting the proposal in order to meet the aspirations of the master plan to achieve independent specialist use of the building sometime in the future. And as Councillor Reid said, no guarantees even when that might be achieved. But in regard to our understanding, I think, really, and compliance with the guidance that we have within the MPPF, and in most situations, if not all, we are guided by that, and I think largely instructed by that in regard to the way we should operate as a planning committee. And again, our officers are pointing out to us, I think it would accord with the guidance contained within paragraphs 19 and 23 of the MPPF. I can't quote it quite like Councillor Taylor's been able to quote her own paragraphs, but she's done a bit more research than I have on this. But that's our dilemma, I think, really, and the officers have made an objective assessment. But providing that we can be assured, I think, really, that there is going to be real progress in regard to the master plan, that there is going to be an achievable objective that perhaps will give this discretion to this committee this evening. I understand where Councillor Taylor's coming from. I don't have a view about betting shops per se. I don't use them, so to that extent it's not a personal commentary on my part. But I think this dilemma that we're faced with tonight is probably only resolvable by abstention.
Any more comments? Yeah. I'm sorry, no members of the public are allowed to speak. Well, no. Well, no, I'm not. I'm not granting that, I'm afraid. Members, we have a proposer and we have a seconder. Oh, reasons. Yes, reasons. Can we?
It's going to be down to me. Reasons as stated in the MPPF paragraphs. I mean, the relevant bits, the last bullet point in paragraph 23 and 17 under core planning principles. And also how that ties in with our top of town vision master plan. I don't think I can put any others.
Yes, go ahead.
You may want to consider, I think from the comments and debate that we've heard that I think it appears that members are saying that they think it won't enhance the vitality and vibrancy of this particular part of the town centre. So it may be that you wish to include that within the reasons. I think that's the kind of message I was hearing from the debate, but I'd just like members to obviously make a decision on that.
I mean, perhaps I could just bring the quotes over to you so you can get them exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Right, we have reasons. There's been a proposal and a seconder for refusal. Those in favour raise their hands. Those against? Abstain? The motion therefore is refused. And Lisa, will you know, or will Rob? You will.
Yeah, the application is refused for the reasons Councillor Mrs Taylor outlined earlier, particular reference to paragraphs 17 and 23 of the NPPF, and also the vision, top of town vision, with particular emphasis on the independent and specialist shops and cafes focus.
Thank you. We now move to item number 4, which is Star Lane Highclere, erection of a detached 3-bedroom dwelling. And I have got speaking, the parish is represented by Councillor Horace Mitchell, objectors by Mr N White, and in support is Mr Justin Packman. And Ms Sowden is present. Thank you. Yes?
Just really a point of information, if I may, Chair. I mean, obviously, having gone through this process once before in regards to this application, I mean, I realise that there was a small failure in regard to the serving of notice in regard to one of the adjoining neighbours. What will be the process this evening? I mean, we're not going to rerun the whole process this evening because of that, are we? That we went through some time ago?
I think afraid we are, and Lisa's just going to explain it to us.
Yeah, as you're rightly saying, you've seen this application before a few months ago in a previous submission. The application was withdrawn on the basis of the incorrect serving of the certificate, and therefore this is in effect a new application. However, the only difference is that the correct certificate has now been served. It's similar in all other respects to the item that you resolved to approve at this meeting back in April. So therefore the recommendation from officers remains the same. However, given that it is a new application, it does trigger the public participation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Faulkner, are you speaking? Did you want to speak? You apparently you're down. You're not on my list. Right. Councillor Mitchell, welcome back. You have 4 minutes, and we'll give you a minute's notice. Have we not? No, she's had her say.
Well, good evening, members. For those with long memories, it would be nice to say it's nice to be back. But as I'm missing a theatre outing, it's my pleasure of being with you is slightly muted. And that being the case, as you've just heard from Councillor Potter, you might well wonder why the Parish Council is taking up your time and mine again on an application that's very substantially the same as one you've already dealt with. And there are two reasons. First, we believe that your officers gave you misleading advice last time around, and that this led you to the wrong conclusion, as I hope to explain. And second, that given the chance to revisit this case, to ensure that before you make a decision, you fully take into account the strength of local community concerns, which are a material consideration, as represented by a unanimous decision of the Parish Council, which reviews all applications with care, doesn't lightly oppose any development, and regularly provides active support to appropriate development, including new dwellings. On the first point, on page 91 of your papers, officers very clearly advise that the proposed development is against your policies. But they suggest that the provisions of the MPPF mean you can and should ignore the fact that it's against policy. I'm assuming if it's approved against policy, it will go to the relevant committee for consideration. The reason given is that the council lacks an up-to-date local plan and hasn't got a 5-year housing supply, and the MPPF says you should therefore approve sustainable development. However, very recently, as February, the government, in reply to the parliamentary committee's recommendations, say in a command paper which has force of law that the lack of an up-to-date local plan and all the other things do not mean that local authorities surrender their ability to influence the future development of their areas. The MPPF requires that development be sustainable. The same February statement confirms that in making decisions you should give equal weight to the three aspects of sustainability: environment, society and economy, which actually came into play in your most recent discussion. The absence of a settlement policy boundary means the site is certainly deemed in policy terms to be unsustainable. Your new local plan, well advanced and already under assessment by the inspectorate, retains settlement policy boundaries as a planning factor and indeed plans to review them. Officers appear to believe, or are seeking to persuade you, that the lack of a 5-year housing supply means a development against policy should and can and should be approved. This is patently not the case, as evidenced by several appeal decisions and the government's own statement.
1 minute.
Thank you, Chairman. The development is clearly also back garden development. The MPPF confirms that you should resist inappropriate development of residential gardens. By any stretch of the imagination, this is inappropriate. Had officers sought to persuade you to refuse this application, many of the things they cite in favour would equally be cited against. The extraordinary shape of the plot, the cramming in, the fact that this is clearly back garden development, the very severely restricted parking, the lack of any garage facilities in an area where everyone depends on their cars, the rather ludicrous location of the cycle storage, and when they have spotted an issue, such as the equally ludicrous location of the bins, they helpfully tell you that this can be resolved, when otherwise it would be a reason for refusal. One last thing. The MPPF calls for community engagement and emphasises the role of localism. The government emphasises that social consideration should weigh equally with environment and economy. Officers are asking you to balance your decision in favour of their interpretation of the MPPF and against your own policies. We are asking you to correctly balance your decision in favour of your own policies, the clearest possible representation of community views through the Parish Council and the Local Environment Society, and the Government's own guidance on how the MPPF should be interpreted.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councillor
members, and I'm sorry I ran over time. But you wouldn't have been surprised.
Members, questions for Councillor Mitchell? No? Thank you very much. Now, Mr. White for the objectors. You will have 4 minutes, Mr. White, with 1 minute warning at the end.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Nicholas White. I live immediately adjacent to the proposed plot. I'm also representing the views of my two neighbours at Coombe View and Hadley Cottage, who also strongly object to this application. We believe that your case officer's recommendation for approval are misguided, in no small measure by misleading plans. One of our principal concerns is the height and position of the dwelling. It sits tight in its northwest corner of a very small plot, within 2 metres of the front boundary. The plans purport to give the impression that it is in scale with our adjoining property. The ridge height of the proposed dwelling is stated as 7.5 metres. Our property has a ridge height of 6 metres. If built in this location, the result would directly overlook my neighbour's main garden areas, as well as a significant shadowing of our property due to the track of the sun. Another consequence of such a tight site is that much of the hedge would be lost along the western boundary as a result of providing the car parking and the siting of the dwelling. With regard to the size of the plot, I provided with my letter of objection an aerial photograph showing the sizes of this land and adjoining property. This site is between 1/4 and 1/2 the size of those that adjoin. In addition, I provided copies of a previous planning refusal and appeal decision for an identical proposal on adjoining land, which was rejected on the grounds that it was a cramped form of development with a lack of space about the building to the detriment of the visual amenities of the area. There have not been any significant changes to environmental policies that would now allow this new development. A precedent was made by that decision. The question of protecting the character of the area from inappropriate development was clearly a reason why a previous owner of Hadley felt it appropriate to include a covenant against any additional development in Hadley's garden. A copy of that covenant was also included with my objection. Whilst there is a shortage of affordable homes in the area, we contest the applicant's assurances that this property would add to the stock of affordable homes in the district, particularly with a likely value of over £450,000. On a more general note, we do not believe that the policies of the MPPF outweigh the clear environmental issues that apply here and the subdivision of a garden plot that will act as a precedent for similar scale inappropriate development throughout the village. In conclusion, we would ask that you refuse this application with the hope that an alternative scheme will be forthcoming that proposes a self-contained annex to Hadley. However, if you were minded to consider approval, then we would ask that the applicant re-site the dwelling in line with our garage and in consequence extend the rear garden boundary to the side of the newly constructed double garage in Hadley's garden. This may go some way to mitigate some of our concerns. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. White. Members, any questions for Mr. White?
Yeah.
Councillor Leeks.
Is anyone's quick question? Where you said you're representing 2 other people. Where do you live, please?
I live in Barncourt.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Right. Thank you, Mr. White. Next, Justin Packman, please, in support. You will have 4 minutes, Mr. Packman, and we'll give you 1 minute's notice at the end.
Thank you, Chair.
The planning application before you this evening is identical to the one which members resolved to grant consent for back in April. Following April's committee meeting, the previous application needed to be withdrawn and resubmitted because the correct ownership certificate had not been served. That was my fault, as I submitted the application. If the decision notice had been issued by the local authority at that stage, it would have left the outcome vulnerable to legal challenge by third parties, and hence it was a sensible thing to do. This administrative issue has now been rectified with the correct notice having now been served. Now, I'd just like to briefly respond to some of the concerns raised by local residents. On the matter of affordable housing, I confirm that we were in no way attempting to misrepresent the proposals as an affordable housing scheme. We were merely pointing out in the planning statement that the proposal will be occupied by my client's daughter and her growing family, and this is purely background information. There's not a material consideration in the determination of his application. I think some of the objections raised regard to the right of access. My client does have a right of access over the track. It was purely a case of serving the correct notice. I hope this clears up some of the confusion surrounding the planning application on those points. Since April's committee, there have been no material changes to either the application proposals or the planning policy framework that would lead members to make a different decision from that made in April. I hope that members can now resolve to grant planning consent again for the proposed development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Packman. Any questions for Mr. Packman, members? No? Right. Thank you, Mr. Packman. Councillor Faulkner. You will have 4 minutes, Councillor, and I'll give you 1 minute's notice.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee, for listening to this again. I'll paraphrase what I was going to say in view of some of the concerns that this is repetitive before, because the two speakers, Councillor Mitchell and Nicholas White, have made it very clear as regards things such as the MPPF, the clash between that and our policies on developing in gardens, and how we should resist inappropriate development. And I consider this development to be completely inappropriate because the site is unsustainable. Just to highlight that 6-7 years ago, the inspector declared that Highclere and Penwood and that area was unsustainable and abolished the settlement policy boundary. And nothing has changed in that time. In fact, matters have got worse because the number 21 bus service was abolished in January, which went to Tesco's 5 miles away in Newbury. And so the area is totally car dependent. The local roads, in most cases, have no pavements and are extremely hazardous for walking. I think the previous speakers covered 3 dimensions on the MPPF. So I will go to one key point which is different to when the previous application was put before you. I remember at that committee meeting there was quite a hushed silence when it was stated that the access road, which is an unmade track, is privately owned. And that, I felt, questioned the practicality of the application, as you'll see from that. And having had a garden built, a house built in my neighbour's garden, the equipment that they use these days, I struggle to see how construction vehicles, should they be allowed, will access the property, the site, without inflicting serious damage on the hedges and possibly the neighbouring gardens. And I presume that will only lead to dispute and possibly litigation, which would be a very sad situation. But I urge you to refuse this application purely on the planning conditions that this site is unsustainable, and I don't believe in the officer's report that have made a robust enough case to suggest that this is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions for Councillor Faulkner? Okay. Oh, Councillor Potter.
Try to phrase it in the way of a question, but really just asking for Councillor Faulkner's commentary upon what the officers have put to us, Councillor. It's on page 91, but it's relevant, I think, to what you've been commenting on in regard to the sustainability aspect, and it's really quoting elements of paragraph 55 of the MPPF, which I know you know by heart, Graham, anyway, but in all seriousness, what paragraph 55 goes on to say is that local planning authorities should avoid new isolated homes in the countryside unless there are special circumstances that justify otherwise. It's therefore necessary to establish whether this proposal would result in an isolated home in the countryside before establishing whether special circumstances are relevant. The application site and the dwelling of Hadley are located immediately to the north of Star Lane in the village of Highclere. I know you know that. Residential properties lie immediately to the north, east, south and west of the existing dwelling in what is clearly a well-established residential area of the village. I mean, in terms of that sustainability, I mean, by definition, there are a group of properties, all of which are sustainable, and this is one other to be added into that mix, presumably. Is that the analysis that I'm entitled to make? I know I've made it before, but I want to make it again, if I may.
No, Councillor Potter, no, I mean, your points are well made, but the problem we have with so much of the MPPF is interpretation. So yes, we can't demolish Highclere and Penwood because it's unsustainable, it's there. But sticking a house into the middle of a development in an inappropriate site up a private road, I think that is inappropriate development, as opposed to, I've said before in front of this committee, I've defended the concept of isolation, which I think most rural communities are not isolated. That's just a fact of life.
Any more questions? Right, thank you, Councillor Faulkner. We will now move to questions to officers, members. Councillor Taylor.
I feel I ought to ask the question on behalf of the owner of Barn Court, although I think I know what the answer is going to be. But he's asked that could there be a minor amendment to shift it slightly backwards in line with his house?
Members have to assess the application before them, as officers have done, and as recommended, we have found this scheme that's before us tonight to be acceptable in all respects, and indeed your committee also found it to be acceptable just a matter of months ago. So there would be no reason to seek a minor amendment in this case.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Right, we move to debate. Do I have any? Councillor Leeks.
You forgot my name there, Chairman. I think I'm going to have to move for the recommendation, otherwise I think we're going to look absolutely stupid. A few months ago it was agreed accordingly that they should build because they hadn't dotted the I's and crossed the T's, if I got it the right way round, I hope. We would look absolutely silly if we turned it round and said no now, because there's nothing changed apart from this piece of paper, and also the fact that we would just look absolutely stupid, and I think we'd go for appeal and probably win it on that. So I'm proposing it, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Councillor Bound.
I'll second that.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to make a comment? Right, we have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour, raise your hands. Yeah, those against? Abstain? One abstention. The motion is carried. And Mr. Sowden will wrap it up.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application is approved as per the agenda paper.
Thank you. We now move to item number 5, which is Elm Road, Overton. And speaking at this, I have Mr. Minnell in support, and the officer presenting is Rob Sims. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for erection of a double garage. The application is recommended for refusal for the reason expressed on page 111 of the agenda, on the basis that it's contrary to, say, policies E1 and E6 of the local plan and contrary to Appendix 13 of the Design and Sustainability Supplementary Plan document, which is extending your home and replacement dwellings. Just one update for members, a short update. Since the initial report, the applicant has provided additional information and an additional plan, which includes photographs of the site and garages of other sites within Overton, and an additional section plan of the site, which will be included on the presentation slides.
Thank you. Mr. Minnell, would you like to come and speak? You will have 4 minutes, and I'll give you 1 minute's notice, and you press the long bar, the long black bar.
Good evening. I purchased the property in Elm Road as a future retirement home for my wife and I. Now that our 3 children have left home and are living independent but still within the village. I'm a carpenter and joiner by trade, so hope you can appreciate how keen I am to build an oak-framed garage, which I hope you will all agree is in keeping with a rural village setting. For me, a garage is essential, if not a basic requirement to have, not only for our vehicles, but also for secure storage for the tools of my trade. I have taken great pride and satisfaction in the properties I have built and worked on in and around Overton in the past, and I am not requesting that I be allowed to enact an imposing structure built of materials out of keeping with the surroundings, but one of natural oak, the like of which you can see across the country, predominantly in rural settings. In fact, you can see from the photographs supplied to you similar examples of the very type of timber frame garage already in existence in Overton. You may even agree that they've been built in more imposing locations and quite clearly in front of the host building line, very similar to the one we propose to build ourselves in Elm Road. We have asked our planning application to come before you as a committee, as it seems, despite having no objections from our neighbours or local residents and have the support from Overton Parish Council, we are facing refusal by the designated planning officer on the grounds that it will have a detrimental effect on the street scene at Elm Road, Overton. We would like to say that this is the very last thing we are trying to achieve here, and believe quite simply this would not be the case. We feel that 2 very important facts have not been taken into consideration that would nullify any criticism of the plan. Firstly, that the proposed garage would be set into the ground by at least ½ metre, and secondly, that the bungalow opposite, which is the only dwelling in any way affected by the garage, is not only offset but also on elevated ground by some 1½ metres, providing a clear view unobstructed by the proposed garage. It is our view that this is the most practical and obvious position for the garage, not just for ourselves but also for our neighbours' perspective and any other passer-by. Hence, that's why we believe we've had no objections from our neighbours or indeed over to the Parish Council. Finally, my wife and I have taken great comfort that we have had the full support from our local borough councillors, Councillor Tilbury and Councillor Fillimore, who unfortunately are unable to attend this evening, but whose views on the future of Overton we respect immensely. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening. I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Minnell. Questions? Councillor Westbrook.
Good evening, Mr. Minnell. Can I just say, you've mentioned that it's been sunk into the ground, so does that mean that the overall finished height is going to be below the 4 metres that's in the report? So you're going to be less than that?
It is actually.
So what's the actual roof height going to be now then?
At the moment,
on the drawing? Sorry.
The sectional roof height is 3.8 metres, and it's stated it's 4 metres. It is actually 3.8 metres. We excavated the ground, or lowered the levels of the ground actually today. We are actually physically 2 feet or 600 mil below that. Effectively, what that would mean is it's going to be probably a further 100 millimetres below what we've got on the plan already. Effectively, I think it will be something like about 450, 550, or if you're in feet and inches, 20 inches below the height of the bungalow itself. Okay.
Any more questions? No? Right. Thank you, Mr. Minnell. Right, members. Questions to officers? Do we have any? No? Debate. Does anyone have... Councillor Taylor.
I think if I put on my common sense spectacles here, you've only got to look at page 118 of 120 to see the layout of this plot of land. And it just seemed, I'm sure you'll agree, it just seems the obvious place to put a garage, really. There's no more obvious place to put it. It makes quite a pleasing little frontage there, which actually used to be the backage, I'm told, but it's now the frontage. And also there is hedges around this garage, so I don't think you'll even be able to see it from this quiet little street called Elm Road. So it really won't dominate at all. And I really can't see any reason. There's nowhere else to put it, and it just seems the ideal spot for a garage. So I think on the grounds of common sense, if there is such a planning policy, I would recommend approval.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hood. Anybody else want to make comments before... do we need more reasons other than common sense?
Reasons for approval.
Reasons for approval, people. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Jim. I didn't go on this site visit. I mean, I've been to Elm Road and I know it, and I was reflecting, I think it's contained in one of the local councillors' commentary about a not dissimilar application I think we looked at in Bury Down going back a while ago, where again, you know, the building line wasn't deemed to be sacrosanct. And the point that I make is that if you're looking for reasons, and I've, as usual, been entirely supportive of officers this evening, but I think it's the exact reverse of probably what's in the reasons for refusal, really, because I think it would be visually satisfactory, and it won't be dominant, it won't be dominant of the host property, just the opposite. And within the street scene, as Councillor Taylor has said, I think it's the most obvious siting of an independent garage of this nature. And to that extent, I don't think it's going to impact in any way, in an unsatisfactory way, on the so-called street scene in Elm Road. And I just think, as Councillor Taylor said far more eloquently than I mean, there are sound planning reasons as well as obvious common sense reasons to say that we should approve it.
Yeah, so just in kind of summarising those comments, you would be saying that it would be in accordance with Policy E1 and Appendix 13 and Policy E6.
Thank you. Right, we have reasons. Those in favour of approval, I've got a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour, raise your hands. Those against? Abstentions? 1. That vote is therefore carried. We need some conditions. Or you're going to do the conditions? Rob, you'll do them? Right. Conditions following.
Thank you, Chair. Suggested conditions then, in accordance with the approved plans, which includes the latest plan on the section through the site. Development to be begun within 3 years from the date of permission. No development should commence until a schedule of materials and finishes for all external walls and roofs of the building have been submitted to the local planning authority. And an additional one, the existing hedge position on northern boundary shall be retained, and any part of the hedge which is removed without consent or dies or becomes damaged during a period of 5 years from the date of completion of development shall be replaced within the next planting season with a hedge of similar size and species, unless otherwise agreed with the local planning authority. So 4 reasons for
Thank you, Rob.
4 conditions.
Are you happy with those members? Right. That's it. Thank you all very much, and good night.